Okay, welcome to the noon hour slide presentation, and welcome to the people that are coming in remotely as well. So in last winter, in early February, I took a cruise to South Africa. Now, why South Africa? Well, Cape Town has sort of been one of our Cooper family places in memory. My great aunt Alice, I'm named after my Aunt Alice, who was named after my great Aunt Alice. She was engaged to a man called Will Durrell, who went to the Boer War. And he stayed in Cape Town, set up a business, and my great Aunt Alice was supposed to meet him there. However, she died of tuberculosis before she got there. So as a result, I still have Will Durrell's poker chip. I'm not sure how I came to get that, but and later on, my Uncle Fred traveled to Cape Town to try and take over Will Durrell's business, but that didn't pan out. So Cape Town has sort of got some Cooper connections in there. And why a cruise? Well, I'd read that South Africa was fairly dangerous, and I made the mistake of going on the Canadian government website, and I'm not going there again because if you read that, you won't go anywhere. You won't even go to your post box. Everything seems dangerous and everything. And I'm sure we could have done Cape Town by ourselves as long as we were careful in the evenings. But anyway, we ended up on this cruise because we thought, wow, that's a very safe way of seeing the country. So we just mainly touched base in South Africa on the outside port cities. But it was a lot of fun and quite an interesting trip as it was. So we started out in Cape Town, and then we went around the Cape of Good Hope to Mossel Bay. This has Portuguese connections to Bartholomew Diaz, which we will see, then to Port Elizabeth, which is a major port, and it is the second largest Volkswagen car plant in outside of Germany. So it's quite a going place. And then we go up to Richards Bay up the East Coast. And then that's sort of like a nature preserve there. Then we go down to Durham, one of the major cities. And then we come around the Cape again and go up to Namibia, which used to be German Southwest Africa, and go to the Namibian sand dunes. So that's where we're heading on this cruise. So here's a picture of Table Mountain. And you see that the city of Cape Town is at the base of Table Mountain. It's a huge massif of rock that goes right down to Cape of Good Hope. Now it looks like the caldera, the volcano from this picture. And in one book I read that it was an active volcano over 1 million years ago. Also sedimentary rock and has been very eroded over time. Now, Cape Town, when Portugal had it, they saw it as a port, but they didn't take too much notice of it, actually. Who decided to make it bigger are the English and the Dutch, because they were on their way to the East Indies for the spices and teas and silks. And so what they did is they wanted to stop off here and replenish their supplies, get more fruits and vegetables because of the scurvy, eventually wine as well, for their trip further east. So Cape Town became quite a large port, mainly because of the Dutch and the British. And it's a huge, these are pictures just taken out of the bus, so they're not great. A huge city, business, large amount of business. We drove by and a port, and we drove by the hospital where Christian Barnard in 1967 did the first heart transplant. So a real major city. And I wish we had more time. I wish we'd been more daring. And usually Noreen and I are a little bit more daring than this. So we could have spent a lot more time in Cape Town, but we didn't. Gone. Along the side, so then we took a tour down to Cape of Good Hope, the very tip of Africa. And along the way are some beautiful residences, and the beaches were just fantastic as you go. Here's part of the massif, and it's around Houts Bay, which is on your way to the tip. Also here is this Chapman's Point or Chapman's Road here that winds around the massif, and eventually you end up at the other side of the beaches, and glorious beaches, beautiful beaches along the way. And so, yeah, so there's beautiful beaches and sands. Yeah, there's a lot of fog because of the current coming up from Antarctica. So you get the cold and the hot meeting, so you get quite a bit of fog. We saw some apes along the way, if you can believe it, some baboons along the way. Today was a very rough sea. But here we are at the tip of Africa, Noreen and I, Cape of Good Hope. And you could walk up to the top where there was a lighthouse. And here are some people doing just that. They're having trouble with global warming. Usually the fires would come one every 5 years. Now they're moving up to one every 2 years, and the vegetation is having trouble keeping up. But instead of walking, of course, we're on a tour, so they're going to take us up in a funicular, so we don't have to climb. We still had some stairs to climb, and here's the fog. There's a lighthouse up here, and this is about all we saw of it. We had to click our pictures fast because then it was back into the fog. And here's a picture looking back on the other side of the Table Mountain complex. Then on the way home, they stopped at this African penguin colony. And it's right on the ocean. And these penguins look like the Magellanic penguins from the Falkland Islands, but they've got a little pink around the eye, so they're a little bit different. Then they took us to Kirchenbach Garden. And in this, they have a lot of the natural plants of South Africa. I read someplace there's 8,000 different types of plants in this area. 2,000 are just found in South Africa. And so this says it was since 1913, does it say? Of course, Nelson Mandela was there. And here we're walk through the botanical gardens, and you see some different plants of South Africa. This is the Proteus plant, and it is actually their national flower. And it was blooming at the time we were there. And then also in the gardens, they have this amphitheater, and families come on the weekends and enjoy music and picnics and so on. And then we're back to the port, and our ship is taking off. And we get a last view of Table Mountain. We will come back here at the end of the cruise. This is the time that the Houthis shut down the Red Sea port, and all of the shipping had to come around the Cape of Good Hope. So there were lots of ships out on the ocean that normally we probably wouldn't have run into. So now we're going around the Cape into Mossel Bay and Port Elizabeth. Mossel Bay, there's tugboats coming out, and we had to tender into the shore. Mossel Bay is very famous for Bartolomeu Dias, the Portuguese explorer, who in 1488 took his little caravel from Lisbon with people in it to discover new worlds. That's 4 years before Columbus set sail. The Portuguese were way ahead of Columbus. They knew what was going on. Bartolomeu Dias knew that there was the Indian Ocean, but he couldn't make it. He had to turn back because his ship was mutinying and they were running out of supplies, so they had to turn back. But Portugal really was the navigators of the sea and brought a lot of scientific applications to seafaring. Now, this is a shoe. Now, why is she putting a postcard in a shoe? Well, we all mail postcards to people we thought would appreciate a postcard. And I got mine 6 months later. So, I mean, this is not fast mail, this here. But why a shoe? Well, because the sailors who were heading east to the East Indies and back to Europe had to have a way of getting mail back and forth. So they hoisted a boot from this particular tree. You notice there's a little cairn underneath. And from this tree, they hung boots and they would put mail in it. So if you were heading back to England, you'd stop here, check the mail, and take the mail, whatever it needed to go to England. And the same if they're going to the West Indies. If somebody left mail there, you would pick it up and take it to the East Indies. So anyway, this was the courier system of its day. And so, but like I said, it took us 6 months to get a postcard, so maybe the boot would have been a quicker method, who knows? Here's also Mossel Bay, the beaches of Mossel Bay. This is a replica of Bartholomew Diaz caravel ship. The caravel ships were made by Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal. These are the ones that the Portuguese used to go all over the world. This is a replica of it that they built in Lisbon in 1988 to commemorate the 500th anniversary of Bartholomew Diaz landing in Mossel Bay. And so on February the 3rd that he landed, 1988, this ship came into Mossel Bay Harbor from Lisbon. So they reenacted that whole voyage. But this is how little that ship is. And they went all over the world in these little ships with a sail. And there's the sort of the rudder keel area of the ship. Also in Mossel Bay were these rocks and cliffs. And I did some research before I went, and this is an area where archaeologists, just in the last part of the last century, found out that they found caves here where they have found social proof. Well, proof of social activity from 160,000 years ago. So this is the oldest known social activity, forging tools, etc., that they have found in existence. And they are in these caves of Mossel Bay. So it's extremely important. However, you have to pre-make an appointment to go into these caves. But this is the area that the caves are in. Now, St. Blaise Trail, when Bartholomew Diaz landed here, it was February the 3rd. And wouldn't you know, the day we were in right here was February the 3rd. So I thought that was quite a coincidence that we would be there on the day Bartholomew Diaz landed. Anyway, this St. Blaise Trail goes for 13 kilometers along the shore. And this is where some of the caves are. We didn't have time to do that, but anyway. And here's a little animal that we found on the cliffs of those caves. And this is called a hyrax, Hyrax. And what is it related to? Apparently it's related to, get this, an elephant. How can this be? I don't know. It looks like a chipmunk to me, but whatever. And of course, this is some of the shoreline and the cave structures. We walked up this path along the beach to get up to the lighthouse here that's on the promontory. Then we went to Port Elizabeth, the Volkswagen manufacturing plant area. The British settlers landed there in 1820, and of course this started the big fight between the Boers, the Dutch settler Boers that had been there for a couple hundred years, against the English, that ultimately led to the Boer War. So this is the area the British colonists landed. In Port Elizabeth, we decided to go on a safari. Now, we'd already been to Tanzania and we'd been in the Serengeti. Well, nothing can top the Serengeti watching a cheetah take down a gazelle. I mean, it's not happening. But this was a really interesting one for different reasons. So we get in these little jeeps and off we go. It's a game preserve. And because the land isn't very good, these farmers decided to make little game preserves themselves. So they got animals from all around Africa, and there's a whole bunch of these smaller game preserves. So they get the animals from all around Africa, and they put them in here. It's fenced in, but it's like 30K in one direction. So this is huge, massive amounts of land that they have for these preserves. And they have different kinds of animals. Of course, the different kinds of antelopes and gazelles and impalas and they're free, but and they're running free. They don't feed them. This is a natural habitat. Uh, you know, nature is prevailing here, and we've got some zebras. And then we saw a bunch of hippos, oh no, rhinos, sorry, there they are. And here's some little birds in the rhino mud and a heron. And here's the rhino wanting to get into the mud to get cool. We got some ostriches going on here. But you see, the land isn't all that good. It's very dry. And we've got a lion going here. Now, these lions actually, you know, they eat the antelope. The antelope are there, they're getting eaten. But the game preserves, they share animals. So, you know, maybe they'll move this lion to another game preserve and pick up another lion and move it in. So they work hand in hand to keep the gene pool, I guess, fairly good. So it was kind of interesting how these game preserves worked and how they started out. And there's the food for the lion. I think we saw some elephants and some little babies. And this, I thought it was an eland at first. It's another name that I can't remember, but some kind of a larger deer similar to an eland. And then we're back on the ship, ready to go to Richards Bay. Yet more cruise ships. So we're at the bottom, Port Elizabeth. We're working all the way up to the right-hand side to Richards Bay, where there is a wetlands national park. And when I looked out in the morning, we saw this. Isn't this lovely? Look, it's sort of like, oh, it looks so beautiful, and isn't this wonderful? And I thought, oh, what a perfect place. And Vasco da Gama had sailed into Richards Bay on Christmas Day, when Vasco da Gama came through Port of Good Hope into the Indian Ocean over to India. And Christmas Day, he landed here. So he called it Natal, Portuguese for Christmas. And of course, then this area eventually became to call Quasi Zulu Natal, because it's the home of the Zulu nation. But I'm thinking, oh, isn't this beautiful, pristine? And there's what the heck is this ship doing coming through? Where did it come from? It doesn't belong here. And then I look, oh, we're in a port. Wow, this is kind of nice. And this is on our side of the ship. Yet again, beautiful, pristine. Then we go to the other side of the ship. Well, this is where it was docked, and the other side's all coal being loaded into trucks. And so that was about the complete opposite. Each side of the ship was complete opposite. They have coal, they have titanium here. They plant a lot of trees, and harvest wood comes through this port as well. And there's some of the trees on the way to get to our national park, the Wetlands National Park. Here are some Zulu villages that we passed on the way. Over to the left, you can see a round building, and that is kind of the, that's the sort of like for their ancestor worship. They have those in their backyards, these round buildings. Okay, where did my little... Okay, and here's the little kids coming home from school, and they're all waving to us. Lots of fruits and vegetables in this area, so we had a few of those. And here we are in the wetlands. This river is coming from Lesotho, and it's a sort of like the river delta heading out to the ocean. It's got a name I can't pronounce. And so we get into these little boats, and we're off to see this animal, the hippos. They're all through this stream, and then they're hiding, and here they are. There's one just dived down, and it's going to come up. There it goes. And these are the little boats that they took up and down the delta. These are weaver's nests. Golden weavers are the bird. and they have all these nests on the reeds at the side. I tried to get a picture of them. I think there's a bit of a gold showing in the background, but they were very hard to get a picture of. There is one, but you can't see its color because it was bright yellow, but you know, coming from the wrong direction, you're not getting the right color on the weavers. But of course, the hippos are the big story here. You have to go see all these hippos. They were really kind of neat. They had some babies with them and so on. Can't have too many pictures of hippos, I guess, eh? And is this a hippo? No, it's a crocodile. So there were crocodiles in the river too. And so then we're off from our river adventure. They've got a sign saying beware of the hippos crossing. And they had an election coming up in May, and this was February. And when I looked up to what happened is the ANC, Nelson Mandela's party, was still in power, but with a minority. So that was the result of this election in May. You had to register to vote in February. Now we're into Durban, which is a huge business town in South Africa. Its claim to fame is a lot of Indian population, because at the turn of the century, they came over to work the land and the Indian people stayed. And Gandhi came over to try a court case. He was a lawyer from India. So he came here and stayed 20 years to fight for social justice for the Indian people who were living in Durban. So it's kind of an interesting place for history, apparently for food, because there's a lot of good Indian food here. Of course, we were eating on the ship, so we didn't get a chance to taste any of the good Indian food. Here's how they've tried to make the dock lands look nicer. The cruise port is called Nelson Mandela Cruise Terminal. We have some nice buildings in Durban. I would have liked to have more time to see Durban. Here is a church where apparently some ANC anti-apartheid people stayed for safety. I didn't hear anything more about it because these cruise tourists were not telling you information. Most of the people, I guess, on tour, I don't know, maybe they're not interested, but I was interested. I never got much information about it. Then we ended up in a big traffic jam, but our driver was very cagey and found a way quickly out of there. We'd be stuck there for 2 hours in this traffic jam. Apparently the traffic is quite bad. But we're going into an area called the Land of a Thousand Hills. It's Zulu territory. This is where the British and the Boers fought, and the Zulus had to take sides. They were caught in the middle of a European fight only for resources. Of course, the British said, of course, they were, maybe being holier than thou and saying they were fighting for a cause, but it really came down to who was going to handle the resources. It was the Dutch Boers or the British. It was lovely territory. And of course, instead of going to learn more about the Zulus, of course, we have the usual tourist dances that they bring in, and singers and so on. And then of course, they have the huts that are similar to Zulu, would have been Zulu huts. Valley of a Thousand Hills. It was a beautiful, beautiful land. I really wish I had more time there to see it. They gave us tea and scones overlooking the beautiful scenery. And also, here's some more crocodiles. Got to see some crocodiles. Those are huge guys. Now, this tells you how much history I learned here. We're driving by in the bus. We didn't even stop to get a picture. We didn't even let off his bus. They were just driving by. And here's the most history I ever found on the trip of the Zulu Kings. Here it is. They got cars parked in front of it. One of the pictures is even defaced. And I never did, like, this is all I got. I got a picture as we were driving by. But that would have been quite interesting to delve into and learn more about. But the buildings in Durban, look at this, it's a beautiful area. I would have loved to have got out and walked in it. But we're back on the ship. As we're leaving, the building in the back is the soccer stadium they built for the 2010 World Cup soccer. And that was the building. And beautiful beaches in Durban as well. I think I had a cousin here from England that married a South African, stayed in South Africa, and at one point lived in Durban. And then, of course, we're going back, we're going all the way around the Cape again, heading up to Namibia. And the seas are not good. And it's lucky I had the patch, which they don't sell anymore, but I had to get a friend in to get one from there when they were down in the States. They had to go to a doctor and get me the patch so I could wear it. Otherwise, I'd have been in my bed the whole time on the seas. But anyway, but an interesting thing is, of course, we're in the South Atlantic here. And when I came up from the Antarctic, we saw albatross, shearwaters, and petrels. And we're seeing the same birds off the ship here. So we're in sort of the same waters. It's still got the cold Antarctic current coming up. So anyway, we're going to land in Lüderitz. But we didn't land in Lüderitz because it was ways were too choppy and we couldn't get in for the landings. Unfortunately, that's too bad because this is a picture I got off the internet. It's an old German mining town. It was very rich in its time because they're diamonds. And they have some really nice old buildings, houses that the German business that people lived in while they were living in Lüderitz. So, and I had a map of the place. I was ready to go walk. We were interested in this place, but we never got off the ship. So I never saw this. I got this picture off the internet. Another claim to fame, although kind of sad claim to fame, is in the very back of that picture. As far as you can see, there's something called Seal Island. They took the natives from the area and they made like a concentration camp for them there, and they all died working and malnutrition. And it's the Germans, so this was kind of the first concentration camp setup that would see eventually World War II concentration camps. And this was the precursor to those. Anyway, we didn't get to see this, but it was an interesting place. The diamonds eventually ran out, and so it was abandoned by the Germans. It's still a port. It's on the Skeleton Coast, so a lot of ships have, the seas are rough, and a lot of ships, if they're going down, they'll go down on the Skeleton Coast of Namibia. Now, this is Namibia in the Namibian desert, and you can tell there's not too much growing here. It's very similar to the Atacama Desert that I showed in my South America slides. It's second driest to the Atacama Desert, but it's older. So it's older, but not as dry as the one in Peru and Chile. But it's just the same. There's nothing growing. It's extremely dry. And it also is about the same latitude. It's both on the west side of a large continent, and you've got the cold water coming up from Antarctica. Very similar situations as to why this is desert land. Now there's these huge sand dunes. They were used in Mad Max Fury Road as well as The Mummy. So they've used these for movies. And this is dune number 7, one of the huge dunes of Namibia, one of the largest. But we're heading inland. This is a pipeline of desalinated water that's heading into the factories and cities in the interior of Namibia. Namibia also has lithium and uranium to sell. So it's a country that has a lot of resources. One savior is the little plant here, the wallachia. It's Namibia's national plant. It's found in here, and actually animals like the springbok actually use it to sustain life, and it'll last for a number of years. It's a strange looking plant, but it does its job to feed the animals. Now here's some of the badlands. You notice it says there's an oasis in 4K. We do eventually go to the oasis, but there's a bathroom sign, so apparently they don't want you going to the bathroom here. Anyway, here's the badlands. And I've seen a documentary recently about this area, and there's actually animals that are living here, like springboks and so on, that find vegetation down in the valleys of all these eroded landscapes. And here's the path that's going down actually to the oasis. I didn't get any pictures of the oasis, but they have, you know, of course they have a store there and a place to get refreshments. And this is on the way back, so you can see the different colors of the dunes as we're coming back later in the day. And when we get down to the ocean again, what have we got? Flamingos. So they were kind of cute. Then go back on the ocean and we're back in Cape Town. So here we go, and on this one here, we're going up Table Mountain. This is our last tour in South America, and we're heading up Table Mountain. And so we drove up, and then when you get partway up, they have a cable car. And here we are, we're going up the cable car. You can also walk. There's a path. You see somebody walking on the path. So you can walk up Cable Mountain. We don't have the time, nor can, I don't think, maybe that was when I was 20, not when I'm this age. So anyway, so you could climb up, and here's some of the rock that we're seeing as we pass up on the gondola. When you get to the top, it's huge boulders of rock and vegetation. They're also trying something new, to harvest fog from here. I talked about the fog before. Well, I guess as the cold water rises and it gets heat, then it becomes foggy. And so they're trying to use this because Cape Town, remember a couple of years ago, Cape Town was running out of water one year, and they were very desperate. And so they have decided that maybe they'd try this approach to try to harvest the fog, see if it works. Also, on the back of some of the washrooms in the tourist areas, they were showing that they were going to dam some of the rivers in South Africa to get more water. And they're really trying very hard to see how they can find water for their country. Some more pictures from the top. Yet again, I wish we'd had more time to wander. Again, indigenous plants for the area. This little guy's up there. And there's another football stadium for the 2001 Soccer World Cup. And it's at the base of the mountain. And you can see back towards the ocean where we traveled to the first day we came to South Africa. Now, here we are in the ship. Now, cruises aren't exactly my type of travel, nor Noreen's, but we had a lot of fun. We did have a lot of fun on the cruise, and a lot of people like cruises, and you know that you can't say you don't have a good time, and you meet wonderful people. So, but it's not really for me. I don't learn as much as I would wandering around a country, getting more of the feel of it. But anyway, here we are on board, and we played a lot of shuffleboard. We had tournaments and picked up some friends. Here's our trivia team. We played a lot of trivia, and these are the people we played shuffleboard with too. Beside me, to my left, is Harry. He was from England. His wife liked to read and didn't want to play trivia or shuffleboard, so we adopted him. The next lady is Mary, and her husband is in the blue. They're from the eastern seaboard of the United States. And then the fellow in the middle is from Calgary. He's Justin. So we managed to pick up these people as and there was a couple of others, two people from Quebec joined us, and another lady from England who was by herself, and she joined us. So we had a really wonderful group. It didn't help with trivia too much, too many people given too many different ideas, but anyway, we had a good time. The one disappointment was that we're in South Africa, and South African wines, like top-notch wines. I want to try South African wines. I figured, oh, on this cruise, you're going to get good South African wines. No, I asked the bartender, I said, can I have a South African wine? No, you can't. Why not? Well, all of the food and liquor come from New York City. They fly it in for this cruise ship, the Norwegian Cruise Lines. They don't use anything local. They fly everything in to that ship. And you weren't going to get any products of South Africa on that ship, which kind of, I think, also defeats the purpose of travel. You're not getting, we never had any Indian food in Durban. Well, that's kind of the thing to do. Anyway, so I was disappointed in that cruise ships were not helping the local economy. They weren't even taking food on because of that. So I don't know. Maybe water, I'm not sure, but South Africa couldn't be giving cruise ships water. I don't know how they did the water situation. I should have asked, but anyway, all in all, it was a fun trip. I enjoyed it. I saw Cape Town and I got to the top of Table Mountain and saw the Cape of Good Hope and was at the end of Africa. So all was good, and another trip that I enjoyed thoroughly. Now, here's a little teaser. I just got back from Madagascar, and here's a teaser for my next presentation, hopefully in the spring. Here's a little lemur. Isn't he cute? We saw a whole bunch of lemurs. And they're getting, they're having their troubles because of the slash and burn agricultural technologies, and they're running out of land, the poor lemurs. So here I am in middle of a couple of baobab trees in the desert. And look at this guy. This is a chameleon. And I did not doctor the colors on that. That's the color that we saw on this little guy, right in the forest or jungle. And look at this cute little frog. He's another cute little guy. So anyway, that's a little teaser for my next presentation of Madagascar.